Welcome everyone. In this video, I'll cover the Transform panel here in the Develop module. This panel was added in Lightroom 6.6 and CC 2015.6. If you're still using Lightroom 5, rather than watching this video, watch the Lightroom 5 version of my lens corrections video. Many of the features in Transform were moved down from lens corrections. Okay, let's get started. This panel will allow you to straighten photos and to correct perspective issues. This photo has a couple of issues that we'll address with this panel. It's not level, it tilts downward to the right. Also, because I photographed the building looking up at it, the vertical lines tilt inward. This is a keystoning effect or a vertical perspective issue. We have a few different ways to address the issues with this panel. We'll start with upright. Creative Cloud users will see a guided upright feature that other users won't see. I'll cover those at the end of this video. Now there's a note down here at the bottom of the panel that says that for best results with upright, apply lens corrections first. I'll open lens corrections, and as I discussed in my lens corrections video, I'll enable profile corrections to apply a profile for my lens to this photo to correct distortion and vignetting. If you're following along with this photo, sometimes Lightroom doesn't detect my lens. If that happens for you, click on Make and choose Canon, and that should be enough for it to fill in the rest of the information. I'll go ahead and remove chromatic aberration, though that's not critical to do before Transform. I'll close lens corrections and come back down, and we're ready to work with upright. Level will straighten the photo. Watch the photo as I click on level. The photo no longer tilts downward to the right. Vertical will level the photo and correct vertical perspective. Full will level the photo, correct vertical perspective, and correct horizontal perspective. I'd have horizontal perspective issues if my camera wasn't parallel to the building as I photographed. If you look at the photo as I click on full, there's a slight adjustment. Now often with full, I find that the vertical elements are stretched too much and look unnatural. Auto fixes all the issues but is more conservative in its approach. I'll click on it. So the vertical lines tilt inward a little bit, but this looks more natural to me. In order to fix this, Lightroom had to pinch in the bottom of the photo. So we have these white or transparent areas that we need to remove. If you're a Photoshop user, you could take this file into Photoshop and use the clone stamp tool, or in some cases Content Aware Fill to fill in these areas. But those of us that are just using Lightroom need to crop these areas off. Clicking on Constrain Crop is one option. It crops off those areas and maintains the original proportions or shape of the photo. If you don't like the result and you uncheck Constrain Crop, nothing happens. You can either do Control or Command Z a couple times to undo that work, or you can come into the Crop tool, click on Reset, and set your own crop. Note that Constrain to Image is the same thing as Constrain to Crop. I'll close the crop tool for now. Now upright can just be a starting point for you. You could then come down to the sliders and fine-tune the result. We've got vertical and horizontal perspective sliders here. So if I want to reduce the amount of vertical correction here, I could slide the vertical slider to the right to adjust that. Let me turn off upright, and I'll click on the vertical slider to reset it, to show you that you could skip upright and simply make all of your corrections manually. So I'll correct the vertical perspective, then I could use the rotate slider to level the photo, and if I see a horizontal perspective issue, I can adjust that as well. Often when you make these corrections, particularly strong vertical corrections, the vertical elements may look too tall because they've been stretched out so much. The aspect slider allows you to widen or narrow the photo. Of course, this could be used to make people a little thinner if you'd like, but I tend to use it after correcting vertical perspective. I talked about cropping off the white areas. That's one option. It does make your photo smaller in terms of how many pixels it is. I'll type I for information. My original is 2500 by 3800 pixels. If I crop this, I have fewer pixels in the photo. That's usually okay with me. When I export JPEG copies to send them off to print, for example, if I want a larger file to print, I can make it larger in the export dialog. You do have another option though. I'm going to do Control or Command Z to undo the crop that I did. The other option is to enlarge this photo to fit the canvas so that we don't see those white areas. That's done with the scale slider. I'll slide it to the right to enlarge. Now, as I did that, I lost the top of the photo. There's no way that I can keep all of the photo because it's been distorted. I'll slide scale the other way just to show you that it's not a rectangle anymore. So I'm going to have to lose part of the photo. But if I enlarge it and then I want more of the top part, for example, I could use the Y offset to drag the photo down on the canvas. Then I can increase the scale to fill the canvas. You can do the same with the X offset slider to get more of the left or the right. So by using scale rather than cropping, my file is still the same size as the original. Now, anytime you enlarge a photo, technically you lose a little bit of quality. But if you're going to need a large file, you're going to have to do it either here or in the export dialog. And realistically, unless you take this to the max and then in the export dialog you also enlarge it a lot from there, you should be fine. All right, let's go to a different photo just so that I can point out that upright is great for interiors as well. I'll try auto and then I'll try full. So we have a great one-click solution. Let me go back to auto to point out that sometimes with auto, Lightroom crops the photo automatically. So if I slide scale down, we can see that part of the photo was cropped off. I'll double click on scale. If auto crops it automatically, there's no way to adjust that crop. Let me go into the crop tool. We don't see that area outside of the crop. So if you don't like what auto did, for example, if you lose a critical part of your photo, you'll need to go with an option other than auto. That way you have full control over the crop. Before I move on to covering guided upright, I want to interject something that I forgot to mention. I'm going to turn upright off. Now you're probably aware that the crop tool contains tools for straightening photos. Let's take a look at what happens if you've straightened a photo using the crop tool before you use upright. I'll simply twist the photo to quickly straighten this photo, and I'll put the crop tool away. I have a message down here that says that upright will reset the crop angle. So it will unstraighten this photo. Generally that's a good thing so that upright can use its own straightening algorithm on this photo. However, if I want to preserve the straightening that I did with the crop tool, I'd hold down the Alt or the Option key as I click on my upright buttons. Of course, in this case, that's not a good idea. Now, it's also the case that if I've done some manual transformations, such as vertical or horizontal corrections, that clicking on an upright button will undo those manual transformations. Again, generally I think that's a good thing, but if you want to preserve manual transformations as you use upright, hold the Alt or the Option key down as you click on the buttons. Okay, let's move on to a different photo now. Unfortunately, there's no button in here to make these into interesting photos, but they're great for demonstrating these features. We'll move on here to guided upright. Now sometimes upright doesn't give a satisfactory option. So there's auto, it's crooked here. level, vertical, and full. There are so many different lines and angles here that Upright can't figure this one out. This is the scenario where I would turn to Guided, available for Creative Cloud subscribers. I'll click on Guided and it will turn off any other option that I had. And I'll draw lines on the photo to tell Lightroom what I want it to correct. So with Guided selected, my cursor is a crosshairs. As I move my mouse, notice that the loop moves. So when the crosshairs hits the corner of the room here, and I see that in detail in the enlarged area in the loop, I'll click, hold my mouse button down, and drag downward, and I'll let go when the crosshairs is on the corner. And then what I wanted to do is to make this line and this line over here parallel. So I'll click on this edge, hold, drag downward, let go, and now they're parallel. It's that simple. Now I've got my tool overlay here in the toolbar, type T for toolbar if you don't see it, set to auto. I like auto because I see these lines that I drew when my cursor is in the photo, but when I move my mouse out of the photo, they're hidden so that I can better evaluate what I've done. Now I just realized that I forgot to apply lens corrections first. I see a little bit of a curve along the edge here. I'll go up to lens corrections, click to enable profile corrections, and then I'll close lens corrections, and in transform I'll click on update to tell Lightroom to recalculate that upright solution. Now with Guided Upright you can draw up to 4 lines. So I've drawn 2 vertical perspective lines. I could also draw 2 horizontal ones. If I want the photo to appear as if I photographed this wall straight on, I'll click and drag along the top, and I'll click and drag along the bottom. I'm not taking the time to be precise. And Lightroom distorts the photo so that these 2 lines are parallel. And then I could crop it manually or click on Constrain Crop. That's a terrible solution, so I'll do Control Command Z, and I would go into the crop tool. If you use Guided Upright and you come back later and want to modify the lines, click on the crosshatch here to get back into the tool. Then to adjust a line, hover over the top or the bottom of it and click and drag. Or if you want to delete a line, click on it and then hit the Delete key on your keyboard. To delete all of the lines, hold down the Alt to the Option key and you'll get a Reset Upright button that you can click on. Now let me go back in to Guided Upright. To mention the grid here in the toolbar, type T for toolbar if you don't see it. If you see your grid all of the time on your photo and you don't like that, click here and choose Auto so that you see it as you're hovering over the transform sliders, or choose Never so that you don't see it at all. If you uncheck Show Loop, you won't see that as you're drawing your lines, so you won't be able to be as precise. So that's it for Guided Upright and for the Transform panel.